Before you do anything, stop scrolling for just a second. Seriously. Because what I'm about to tell you might completely change the way you think about money forever. Have you ever opened your banking app and felt your stomach tighten before it even loaded? Like deep down, you already knew the number waiting for you was going to ruin your mood. You instantly start calculating. How many days until payday? Can I afford groceries this week? If my car breaks down right now, am I completely screwed? And the scary part is, for millions of people, that feeling never truly goes away. Every day feels like financial survival mode. Every expense feels stressful. Every unexpected bill feels like a disaster waiting to happen. But then, something strange happens. At a certain point, money stops feeling like an emergency. And that's where everything begins to change. Not because you became rich, not because you became a millionaire, but because you crossed one powerful financial threshold. A number so important that once you hit it, your entire relationship with money changes. That number is $10,000. And I know what some of you are thinking already. Only $10,000? That's not life-changing money. You can't retire on that. Exactly. That's why most people completely miss how important it actually is. Because this isn't about becoming rich overnight. It's about escaping financial panic. It's about transforming the way your brain responds to money. It's about reaching the point where money finally starts working with you instead of against you. And trust me, once you experience that shift, you never think the same way again. My name is Bisk. And I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people quietly build freedom while others stay trapped in the same financial cycle for decades. And today, I'm going to show you why the first $10,000 changes absolutely everything. But here's the craziest part. The money itself isn't even the most important thing. Most people think wealth is built slowly and evenly over time, like climbing stairs, one step after another. Work harder, save more, repeat. Forever. But real wealth doesn't work like stairs. It works like momentum. And momentum is strange. At first, it feels like absolutely nothing is happening. That's why so many people give up too early. Imagine trying to push a giant boulder uphill. You're exhausted, sweating, barely moving it an inch. That's exactly what saving your first few $1,000s feels like, painfully slow. You say no to eating out, no to random shopping, no to vacations, no to impulse purchases, and somehow your savings account still barely grows. That's why most people quit too early. Not because they're lazy, but because progress feels invisible. Human beings hate delayed rewards. We want effort to create immediate results, but money doesn't work that way. At first, the rewards are microscopic. You sacrifice for months, sometimes years, and it still feels like you're getting nowhere. That's exactly why the first $10,000 matters so much. Because that's the moment the boulder finally starts rolling. That's when financial momentum begins. And once momentum exists, everything changes. The pressure starts easing. Your confidence starts growing. And for the first time, you stop feeling completely trapped by money. That's the real power of the first $10,000. Not luxury, not status, not flexing online. Freedom. Even if it's only the beginning of freedom, it still changes your entire mindset. Here's something nobody talks about enough. When you don't have money, your brain changes. Seriously, your brain enters survival mode. Every financial decision becomes emotional. Every expense feels threatening. Every bill feels stressful. You stop thinking long-term. You stop taking intelligent risks because your mind becomes obsessed with surviving the present moment. You take jobs you hate because you can't afford to wait for something better. You stay in toxic environments because leaving feels too risky. You tolerate situations that destroy your happiness because you need the paycheck. And people who have never experienced financial stress don't understand how mentally exhausting it really is. Being broke isn't just financially painful, it's psychologically painful too. When you're financially stressed, your brain never truly rests. It's like having an alarm going off in the background 24 hours a day. Even when you're trying to relax, your mind keeps calculating. How much money is left? What bills are coming next? What happens if something goes wrong? That constant stress drains your mental energy. And when your brain is overloaded, you make worse decisions. Not because you're stupid, but because survival mode makes long-term thinking harder. But once you save around $10,000, something incredible happens. Your brain finally breathes. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough. Enough to stop panicking constantly. Enough to finally think about growth instead of just survival. And honestly, that's where real wealth actually begins. Before savings, every unexpected expense feels catastrophic. Car repair, disaster. Medical bill, disaster. Laptop breaks, disaster. Everything feels like it could destroy you financially. But once you build savings, those same problems become manageable. Still annoying, still frustrating, but survivable. And that changes how you move through life, because when fear decreases, confidence increases. You stop asking, how do I survive this month? And start asking, how do I build a better future? That single shift changes everything, because now you're finally thinking strategically instead of emotionally. Most people never realize this, but wealth building is more psychological than mathematical. Money changes behavior, behavior changes decisions, and decisions change your future. That's why the first $10,000 matters so much, not because it makes you rich, but because it changes the way you think forever. Now, let's talk about something people massively underestimate: compound interest. I know, it sounds boring, but compound interest is basically financial gravity. At first, your investment gains feel tiny, almost meaningless. You make a few dollars, maybe a few hundred, nothing exciting. But eventually, your money starts generating money, and then that money starts generating even more money. This is the point most people never reach because they quit too early. They stop pushing before momentum starts. But once you hit $10,000, the math begins changing. Returns finally feel noticeable. Progress becomes motivating. And motivation creates consistency, which creates more growth, which creates even more motivation. That's how wealth starts accelerating. Your first $10,000 is the hardest. The next becomes easier. And the next becomes easier still. Not because you magically became smarter, but because momentum finally exists. And momentum is powerful. Once the boulder starts rolling downhill, gravity starts helping you instead of fighting against you. That's exactly what financial momentum feels like, and people who experience it never forget it. Most people think wealthy people have secret investments, secret knowledge, secret opportunities, but honestly, the real secret is much simpler: scale. That's it. When someone with $1,000 earns 10%, they make $100. Nice, but emotionally it barely changes anything. But when someone with $10,000 earns 10%, that becomes $1,000. Now suddenly, those returns actually feel meaningful. And this is where your mindset changes permanently. Because for the first time, you experience money being created without directly trading your time for it. That realization changes people. You suddenly realize there's another game beyond just working for a paycheck. And once your brain sees that, it can't unsee it. But honestly, the most valuable part of saving $10,000 isn't the money, it's who you become while building it. Think about what saving that amount actually requires: discipline, consistency, patience, delayed gratification, self-control. You had to become someone capable of saying no. No to impulse spending, no to distractions, No to temporary pleasure that destroys long-term progress. And most importantly, you proved something to yourself. You proved that you can control your money instead of letting money control you. That identity shift is huge, because once you become someone capable of building savings, once you realize you can probably do it again, and again, and again, that confidence becomes powerful. And honestly, that confidence is worth far more than the money itself. Now, here's where most people ruin everything. They finally save $10,000, feel successful, and immediately destroy it. They buy the expensive car, take the luxury vacation, upgrade their lifestyle, and suddenly they're back at zero again. Listen carefully. Your first $10,000 is not the finish line. It's the foundation. It's the seed. And if you protect it, it can eventually grow into financial freedom. But if you consume it emotionally, you restart the struggle from the beginning. And this cycle traps people for decades. Earn, spend, reset. Earn, spend, reset. Over and over again. Meanwhile, wealthy people do something differently.
They protect momentum. That's the real secret. Not earning more, not luck. Momentum. Now, let's talk about one of the biggest wealth destroyers in modern life. Cars. The average person spends enormous amounts of money on transportation. Car payments, insurance, gas, repairs, maintenance. And most people don't realize how much future wealth they sacrifice because of it. The moment a new car leaves the dealership, it loses value instantly. You're literally burning money. And look, I understand the emotional side of it. Cars feel successful. They create status. They make people feel important. But here's the brutal truth. Many people driving luxury cars are financially stressed, while the person driving the older Honda quietly has investments growing every month. One person looks wealthy. The other is becoming wealthy. Huge difference. And once you hit $10,000, you start seeing those trade-offs differently. That's when your mindset begins changing permanently. You stop asking, can I afford the monthly payment? And start asking, what is this costing my future? That question alone can completely transform your financial life, because now you're thinking long-term instead of emotionally. Once you build savings, you stop thinking only about price and start thinking about opportunity cost. Because every dollar spent today has a hidden future value attached to it. Money invested compounds, money consumed disappears. And once your brain fully understands that, many purchases lose their emotional power. You realize most things people buy aren't creating happiness, they're creating temporary dopamine. Very different thing. And ironically, the more financially secure people become, the less they usually care about looking rich. Because real wealth creates peace, not performance. That's why financially intelligent people often look normal from the outside. No flashy lifestyle, no constant flexing, just quiet stability. And honestly, that quiet stability feels far better than fake luxury ever will. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Saving $10,000 changes more than your finances. It changes your behavior at work. When you live paycheck to paycheck, you're trapped. You can't risk losing your income, so you stay quiet, avoid confrontation, avoid negotiation, avoid taking risks. But once you have savings, something changes psychologically. You gain leverage, you gain confidence, you gain what I call walking away power. And just having that power changes your energy completely. You speak differently, negotiate differently, carry yourself differently. You stop acting desperate, and people notice. Ironically, the less desperately you need opportunities, the more opportunities often come toward you, because confidence is magnetic, and financial stability creates confidence. People say money can't buy happiness, but honestly, that statement is incomplete. Money absolutely can buy something incredibly important: options. And options reduce suffering. Savings allow you to leave bad situations, handle emergencies, take smart risks, sleep peacefully, think long-term, breathe easier. And that's why the first $10,000 matters so much. It's the line between financial panic and financial possibility, between survival and momentum, between feeling trapped and realizing you actually have choices. Look, $10,000 will not make you rich overnight, but it will change the way you think forever. And once that mental shift happens, everything changes. So if you're starting from zero right now, don't quit because progress feels slow. The beginning is supposed to feel heavy. That's the uphill part. But keep pushing, because eventually the boulder moves, and once it starts moving, it becomes very hard to stop. Your future self is depending on the choices you make today.
Even if nobody sees your progress yet, keep going. Because one day, you'll realize your first $10,000 didn't just change your bank account, it changed your entire life. But here's something most people never expect. Once you save money, you begin seeing the world differently. You start noticing how many people are trapped by appearances, people buying things they can't afford to impress people they don't even like. Expensive clothes, luxury phones, flashy cars, fancy restaurants, and underneath all of it, financial anxiety. That's the scary part. A lot of people look successful while quietly drowning financially. Social media makes this even worse because now everyone is comparing their real life to somebody else's highlight reel, and comparison destroys financial discipline. You see someone traveling, someone buying a luxury watch, someone showing off a new car, and suddenly your own progress feels slow. But what you don't see is the debt, the stress, the monthly payments, the sleepless nights. That's why financially intelligent people stop comparing themselves to appearances, because appearances are easy. Actual financial peace is rare. And once you experience real financial stability, you realize peace feels better than attention, much better. That's one of the biggest mindset shifts money creates. You stop chasing validation and start chasing freedom, because freedom changes everything. Freedom means you can say no. Freedom means you can walk away. Freedom means one mistake doesn't destroy your life. And honestly, most people don't actually want luxury, they want relief, they want safety, they want breathing room. That's why the first $10,000 feels emotional, not because the number itself is magical, but because it represents stability. For the first time, you feel like life can stop attacking you every second. That feeling is powerful, and once you experience it, you become addicted to progress. Not status, progress. Now, let's talk about another huge mistake people make. They think increasing income automatically solves financial problems, but that's not always true. Because if your spending rises every time your income rises, you stay trapped. A lot of people make more money than ever before and still live paycheck to paycheck. Why? Lifestyle inflation. The moment they earn more, they upgrade everything. Bigger apartment, more expensive car, more subscriptions, more eating out, more unnecessary spending. So even though their income increased, their financial stress stayed exactly the same. That's why wealth building isn't only about earning, it's about controlling lifestyle inflation. That's the part nobody wants to hear. Because discipline is boring. Consistency is boring. Long-term investing is boring, but boring is usually what creates wealth, not hype, not shortcuts, not fake internet gurus promising overnight success. Real wealth is often painfully simple. Spend less than you earn, invest consistently, avoid destroying momentum, repeat for years. That's it. And I know that sounds almost disappointing because people want a secret hack, but honestly, the simplicity is what makes it powerful. Most financial success comes from avoiding stupid decisions repeatedly, not from making genius decisions once. That's a massive difference. Wealth is usually built quietly, while everyone else is distracted chasing shortcuts. And here's something really interesting. Once people become financially stable, they often stop caring about impressing strangers. Because insecurity drives most unnecessary spending. People buy things hoping to feel important, hoping to feel respected, hoping to feel successful. But confidence built from actual financial stability feels completely different. It's quieter, calmer, more secure. You no longer need external validation constantly because your confidence isn't based on appearances anymore. It's based on knowing you can survive problems. That's real confidence. And honestly, that kind of confidence changes how you walk into every room. People can feel it, not because you're flashy, but because you're no longer desperate. Desperation affects everything: your relationships, your decisions, your career, your mental health, even the energy you give off around other people. And money stress creates enormous desperation. That's why financial stability improves more than just your bank account. It improves your entire emotional state. You sleep differently, you think differently, you react differently. You stop panicking over every little problem, and that emotional stability allows you to make smarter, long-term decisions. That's one reason wealthy people often keep becoming wealthier, not because they're magically smarter, but because stability creates better thinking, and better thinking creates better outcomes. That cycle compounds over time, too. Now, here's the dangerous part. Most people underestimate how expensive being broke actually is. When you don't have savings, every emergency costs more. You can't buy quality. You can't wait for better opportunities. You can't negotiate from strength. You're forced into survival decisions, and survival decisions are often expensive. Cheap products break faster. High-interest debt destroys progress. Late fees pile up. Stress affects productivity. Bad jobs become harder to leave. Being financially unstable creates hidden costs everywhere. That's why building savings is so important. Savings don't just create opportunity, they reduce damage. And reducing financial damage is one of the fastest ways to improve your future. Most people don't realize that. Now let's talk about time. Because time is the one thing money can never fully replace. And the earlier you start building financial momentum, the easier your future becomes. That's the brutal truth about compound growth. Time matters more than perfection. Someone investing consistently for decades usually beats someone trying to time the market perfectly, because consistency compounds. Tiny decisions repeated over years become enormous outcomes. That's why small financial habits matter, not because they instantly change your life, but because they slowly shape your future. And most people ignore small habits because results feel invisible in the beginning. But invisible progress is still progress. That's one of the hardest lessons in wealth building. You often don't see the results until suddenly everything starts accelerating. And by then, people think you got lucky. But luck usually isn't the full story. What people call luck is often years of invisible discipline, years of consistency nobody noticed, years of resisting distractions, years of protecting momentum, and eventually, those invisible habits create visible results. That's when people suddenly say, "Wow, you're so lucky," without realizing how much sacrifice happened quietly behind the scenes. That's why comparing your beginning to someone else's middle is dangerous. You don't know what they sacrificed to get there. You only see the outcome. And social media makes this worse because people love showing rewards but never show discipline. Nobody posts the boring years, but the boring years are where wealth is actually built. And honestly, that's why most people fail financially. Not because success is impossible, but because boredom destroys them. People want constant excitement, constant results, constant entertainment. But wealth building rewards patience, and patience feels uncomfortable in a world addicted to instant gratification. Everything today is immediate. Instant food, instant entertainment, instant shopping, instant dopamine. So when people face a goal that requires years of consistency, they struggle because their brains are trained for speed. But real financial freedom moves slowly at first. That's why the beginning feels frustrating. That's why the first $10,000 feels so difficult. You're fighting both mathematics and human psychology. But once momentum begins, things change. progress becomes visible. Your confidence grows. Your habits strengthen. And suddenly, financial discipline stops feeling painful because now you can see the rewards. That's the moment wealth building becomes addictive. Not because you love money, but because you love freedom. You love stability. You love sleeping peacefully. You know one emergency won't destroy your entire life. And honestly, that peace is something many people spend their whole lives chasing. That's why the first $10,000 matters emotionally. It's proof. Proof that your life can improve. Proof that progress is possible. Proof that you're no longer trapped forever. And once people realize escape is possible, they start thinking bigger. They start investing in themselves, learning skills, taking smarter risks, exploring better opportunities. Because now failure feels survivable. That's huge. Fear controls people when survival is fragile, but savings reduce fear, and reduced fear creates growth. That's why financially stable people often appear calmer. They're not constantly panicking about survival anymore. That mental energy becomes available for creativity, strategy, and long-term thinking. That's where careers improve, businesses grow, and opportunities multiply. Because opportunities often go towards people who can think clearly. And clarity becomes easier when survival pressure decreases. Now, I want you to think about something honestly. How many decisions in your life are currently controlled by money stress? Where you live, what job you tolerate, who you depend on, what risks you avoid, what dreams you postpone. Money pressure quietly controls more lives than people realize. That's why building savings is about more than numbers. It's about reclaiming control. Control over your choices, control over your future, control over your peace of mind. And no, $10,000 won't solve every problem, but it changes your starting position dramatically. It moves you from constant panic to possibility, and possibility changes everything. Because once people believe improvement is possible, they start behaving differently.
Look, I'm not telling you this because I think money is everything. It's not. But financial stress destroys happiness far more than people admit. Constant anxiety changes your health, your relationships, your confidence, your peace. That's why financial stability matters. Not for status, not for showing off, but for freedom. Freedom to think clearly. Freedom to make decisions calmly. Freedom to build the life you actually want. And that journey often begins with the first $10,000. That's the hardest part, the uphill part, the invisible part. But once the boulder finally starts moving, life feels different. And once you experience that momentum, you'll never want to lose it again. So if you're starting from zero right now, don't get discouraged because progress feels slow. The beginning is supposed to feel difficult. That's normal. Every financially successful person had a stage where progress felt invisible, where sacrifices felt endless, where motivation disappeared. But the people who eventually build freedom are the people who kept pushing anyway. That's the difference. Not perfection, persistence. Because eventually the boulder moves, and once momentum starts, everything becomes easier. Your future self is depending on the choices you make today. Even if nobody notices your progress yet, keep going. Because one day, you'll look back at your first $10,000 and realize it wasn't just money. It was the moment your entire life started changing.